The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder that made Hyune grip her seat. Through the small window, she could see Nexus Prime Station floating in the darkness of space. The massive structure looked like a metal city with thousands of lights blinking across its surface. Ships of all sizes moved around it like insects around a bright lamp. This was the Galactic Military Academy, the most dangerous school in known space. Hyune checked her bag one more time. Everything she owned fit into a single container the size of a large backpack. Her mother had cried when she left Earth. Her father had simply nodded and told her to make humanity proud. Her younger brother Jin-Ho had begged to come with her, but Earth was only allowed to send one representative. The docking process took another hour. When the airlock finally opened, Hyune stepped into a corridor filled with beings that made her feel very small and very alone. A creature that looked like a walking tree towered above everyone else. Something with scales and too many teeth hissed as it passed by. A being made of what appeared to be living crystal moved through the crowd without making any sound. She was the only human in sight. The orientation hall was enormous. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of different species filled the space. Some had fur, others had scales, and a few seemed to be made of metal or stone. The air smelled strange, filled with scents from creatures she had never imagined. The sounds were even worse. Growls, chirps, clicks, and noises that had no human equivalent mixed together into a confusing symphony. Director Kale 9 stood at the front of the hall. He was an insectoid being with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. His mandibles clicked as he spoke, and a translator device turned his words into something Hyune could understand. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy," his voice boomed through the hall. "You are here because your species believes you have potential. Many of you will discover this belief was incorrect." He gestured to a wall covered with metal plates. Each plate had names and dates carved into them. "These are the memorial plaques. They contain the names of cadets who did not survive their training. Last year we added 47 new names. The year before, 52. The Academy does not guarantee your survival. It only guarantees that if you do survive, you will be among the finest military officers in the galaxy." A low murmur went through the crowd. Some species made sounds that might have been excitement. Others seemed more worried. "You will be assigned to dormitories based on compatibility and biological requirements," Director Kale 9 continued. "Your first week will involve placement examinations. Combat trials will determine your ranking and specialization track. Those who fail will be sent home. Those who succeed will face greater challenges." His compound eyes seemed to focus on Hyune for a moment, though it was hard to tell with insect features. "The Academy has one simple rule: survive. Everything else is negotiable." After the orientation, cadets were given their room assignments and basic equipment. Hyune found herself walking through corridors that seemed designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceilings were high, the doorways wide, and the furniture was built for different body types. Her dormitory was on level 12 of Block 7. The corridor was filled with strange smells and sounds from behind closed doors. Some rooms had warning signs in languages she could not read. Others had symbols that seemed to indicate dangerous atmospheric conditions. Room 1247 had her name on the door along with another name, Nari. When she entered, she found her roommate already there. Nari was a Felinian, which meant she looked like a large bipedal cat. Her fur was golden brown with darker stripes, and her ears twitched when Hyune walked in. She was nearly 6 feet tall and moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator. Her eyes were bright yellow and seemed to track every movement Hyune made. "So you are the human," Nari said. Her voice had a purring quality that made every word sound slightly threatening. "I have heard about your species. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor, and you are smaller than most prey animals on my homeworld." Hyune set her bag on the empty bed and began unpacking. "We have other advantages, such as we adapt quickly. We learn from our mistakes. We do not give up easily." Nari's ears flattened against her head, which Hyune had read was a sign of either anger or confusion among Felinians. Those do not sound like advantages in combat. "Maybe not in single combat," Hyune agreed. "But combat is not always about who is strongest or fastest." Nari's tail swished back and forth as she watched Hyune organize her few possessions. Everything fit into a small locker beside her bed. No personal items, no decorations, just the basic equipment issued by the Academy. "Why did your species send you here?" Nari asked. "Surely they have warriors who are more impressive." Hyuni considered this question while checking her equipment. Energy blade, basic armor, emergency medical kit, standard communicator. Nothing special. Nothing that would give her an advantage over beings who had evolved as natural predators. "They sent me because I have the best chance of surviving," she said finally. "How can you know that? You have never been tested against real predators." "Because I have been tested against the most dangerous predator on my world." Nari's ears perked up with interest. "What predator is that?" "Other humans." This seemed to confuse Nari even more. Her tail stopped swishing and her head tilted to one side. "Your own species is your greatest threat? Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We learned to survive not by being the strongest or fastest, but by being smarter, more adaptable, and more persistent than our enemies. We learned to work together when necessary and compete when required. Most importantly, we learned that the key to survival is not avoiding fights, but walking away from them alive." Nari was quiet for a long time after that. She groomed her fur with long strokes of her rough tongue while thinking about what Hyune had said. "The combat trials begin tomorrow," she said eventually. "I have seen the other cadets. Some of them are very large and very dangerous. The granite bears can crush metal with their bare hands. The Vorthak have poison in their claws that can kill most species in minutes. The ethereals can become invisible and walk through walls." "What can you do?" Hyune asked. Nari's claws extended from her fingertips, each one as long as a knife blade and sharp enough to cut through most materials. "I am fast. Faster than anything you have probably ever seen. I can climb walls and ceilings. My reflexes are 3 times quicker than most species. In my natural environment, I am an apex predator." "That sounds very impressive. And you? What can you do that makes you think you can survive here?" Hyune lay down on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. The metal above her was covered with scratches and dents from previous occupants. Some of the marks looked like claw marks. Others might have been made by acid or energy weapons. "I can think," she said simply. Nari made a sound that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like a cough. "Thinking will not help you when a granite bear is trying to crush your skull." "Maybe not, but it might help me avoid getting into that situation in the first place." The next morning came too early. The Academy's alarm system was designed to wake up dozens of different species, so it used a combination of sounds, lights, and vibrations that was impossible to ignore. Hyune had been awake for 20 minutes already, having adjusted her sleep schedule during the journey to the station. Nari stretched like a cat, her claws extending and retracting in a morning ritual that looked both graceful and deadly. "Combat trials today," she said, though Hyune already knew this. "Are you nervous?" "Yes. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Overconfidence gets you killed." They made their way to the dining hall, which was another reminder of how diverse the cadet population was. The food dispensers offered dozens of different options, from raw meat for carnivorous species to crystalline formations that some beings seemed to absorb rather than eat. Hyune found something that looked and smelled like familiar protein, and hoped it would not poison her. The dining hall was filled with conversations in languages she could not understand. Some cadets ate alone, others in small groups based on species similarity. A few larger predators sat by themselves, their presence seeming to create empty spaces around them. Hyune noticed that many cadets were looking at her. Some seemed curious. Others appeared to be sizing her up as potential prey or competition. A few looked sympathetic, as if they already knew how her story would end. "They are wondering how long you will last," Nari observed, following her gaze. "How long do you think I will last?" Nari's ears twitched as she considered this. "In single combat against any of the larger predators, you would die quickly. But the Academy does not only test single combat. There are team exercises, strategy sessions, and survival scenarios. In those, your ability to think might be more valuable. And if it is not," Nari's yellow eyes met hers across the table, "then you will be added to the memorial wall, and your species will need to send someone else." After breakfast, all first-year cadets were directed to the combat complex. The main arena was a sphere nearly 100 meters in diameter, with artificial gravity generators that could create different environmental conditions. The third week at the Academy brought advanced combat scenarios and the first real possibility of permanent injury. Director Kale9 had been watching Hyune's progress with growing interest and concern. Her survival rate was unprecedented for such a physically weak species, and her tactical methods were being copied by other cadets with mixed results. More troubling was the effect she was having on Academy traditions. The strict hierarchy based on physical dominance was being challenged by something the faculty did not fully understand. Some species that had been at the bottom of the social order were now performing better than traditional apex predators. Hyune remained focused on survival and learning. Each day brought new tests, and she approached them with the methodical determination that seemed to define her species. Her equipment had been upgraded as she advanced through the rankings, but she continued to rely more on thinking than technology. Her current team included Jae-sung, a granite bear who had requested to work with her after watching her defeat Taijin. Unlike his fellow granite bear, Jae-sung was curious about human methods rather than dismissive of them. "Your people really evolved as persistence hunters?" he asked during a break between exercises. His rocky features made expressions difficult to read, but his tone suggested genuine interest rather than mockery. "Among other things," Hyune replied while checking her gear for the next challenge. "We adapt quickly. That is probably our strongest trait." "But you have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses," added Sujin, a Vorthak whose scales could secrete deadly poison. "How did your species survive long enough to develop technology?" Hyun-ae considered the question while reviewing their mission parameters. They were about to face an urban warfare scenario, designed to test advanced tactical thinking under extreme pressure. "We cooperated with each other. We used tools. We never stopped learning from our mistakes." She looked at each of her teammates. "And we never gave up, no matter how bad things got." The urban warfare scenario was designed to challenge everything they had learned so far. Multiple objectives, time pressure, and an adaptive AI that would learn from their tactics and counter them in real time. Most teams would face this challenge by dividing responsibilities based on species strengths and following established military doctrine. As they moved through the simulated city streets, Hyun-ae noticed something that bothered her. The enemy patterns were too perfect, too coordinated. Real opponents made mistakes, had communication delays, and operated with incomplete information about their enemies. "This is not a tactical exercise," she announced to her team as they took cover behind a destroyed vehicle. Energy bolts from enemy positions scorched the air above their heads. "It is a puzzle. The AI is testing our ability to think outside normal parameters." Her teammates looked confused but had learned to trust her judgment. She quickly outlined a new approach that would have been considered impossible under normal circumstances. "The AI expects us to treat this like real combat," she explained as explosions rocked the area around them. "But it is not real. It is a program with rules and limitations. What if we operate outside those rules?" What followed was unlike any military exercise in Academy history. Instead of engaging enemy forces according to traditional tactics, Hyune's team began exploiting the artificial nature of the simulation itself. They identified glitches in the programming, used environmental systems against the AI, and completed objectives through methods that violated the simulation's basic assumptions. The exercise was terminated early, when the AI began experiencing recursive errors trying to counter strategies that broke its fundamental programming logic. Director Kale-9 reviewed the footage multiple times before calling Hyune to his office. His mandibles clicked rapidly, which she had learned indicated either deep thought or significant agitation among his species. "Cadet Hyune," he began, his mechanical translator giving his words a flat, emotionless quality. "Your performance today was unprecedented." "Thank you, sir." That was not necessarily a compliment. He activated a holographic display showing her test scores and performance metrics. "Your tactical innovations are impressive, but they are also disruptive. This academy has operated under established protocols for 3 centuries. Hyune studied the data while considering her response carefully. Challenging authority figures was dangerous, but she sensed that honest answers were more important than diplomatic ones. "Sir, may I ask what the academy's actual mission is?" The question seemed to surprise him. His compound eyes focused on her with new intensity. "To train the Federation's military leaders, obviously. And who will they be fighting? Unknown future threats, presumably. Then should we not be preparing for unknown tactics rather than perfecting known ones?" Director Kale-9 was quiet for several minutes. His mandibles clicked in complex patterns as he processed the implications of her question. Finally he spoke. "You will continue your current training track, but with additional monitoring. Your methods are interesting. We want to see how far they can be developed without compromising Academy stability." As Hyune left his office, She did not realize that their conversation had been recorded and transmitted to Federation Command. Military leaders across known space were beginning to take notice of the small human who kept surviving impossible situations through methods no one understood. Back in the dormitory, Nari was grooming herself with unusual intensity. Her fur stood up in spikes and her movements were sharp and nervous. "Something wrong?" Uni asked as she prepared for sleep. "There are rumors about you," Nari said without looking up from her grooming. "Some cadets think you are cheating somehow. Others think you are dangerous." Her ears twitched nervously. "A few think you might represent the future of military strategy." Hyune lay down on her narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling. The metal surface was covered with scratches and dents from previous occupants, each mark telling a story of someone who had tried to survive this place. "What do you think?" she asked. Nari's golden eyes met hers in the dim light of their room. "I think you are exactly what you appear to be. A human being doing human things. That is what makes everyone nervous." The fourth week brought an unusual development. Senior cadets from the Academy's final year requested permission to observe first-year training exercises. This had never happened before. Upper-year students typically considered new cadets beneath their notice. Among the observers was Dong-hyun, the only other human at the Academy. He had been there for 3 years, arriving during Earth's preliminary membership negotiations. His presence created additional pressure for Hyune, who suddenly represented not just herself, but humanity's potential within the Federation. During a complex resource management exercise involving territorial control, Hyune found herself commanding 12 cadets from different species against 3 other teams. The scenario was designed to test leadership under stress, with each team competing for limited resources while facing environmental hazards. Traditional approach would be to secure a defensible position and hold it while gathering resources efficiently. Most teams followed this pattern, leading to predictable conflicts over the same strategic locations. Hyune chose a different path. Instead of competing directly for resources, she led her team in a mobile strategy that avoided confrontation while maximizing collection efficiency. When conflict seemed unavoidable, she negotiated temporary alliances that benefited all parties involved. "She is turning a combat exercise into a diplomatic negotiation," one of the senior observers noted with amazement. By the exercise's end, Hyune's team had achieved their objectives while suffering minimal casualties and actually helping 2 other teams reach their own goals. The scenario designers had never considered the possibility of cooperation between competing teams. Dong-hyun approached her after the debriefing session. He was taller than Hyune, with the lean build common among long-term space dwellers. His eyes held the confidence of someone who had survived the Academy's most difficult challenges. "Interesting approach," he said in Korean, their shared Earth language feeling strange after weeks of Federation standard. "Very human. Is that good or bad?" Hyune replied in the same language. "Depends on who you ask." The faculty is divided between impressed and terrified. Other cadets are starting to question everything they thought they knew about effective combat. He paused, studying her with an intensity that reminded her of the faculty evaluations. "There is something you should know. The Academy is not just training military leaders. It is also identifying potential threats to Federation stability. Your innovations are being monitored by parties beyond the educational system." This revelation did not surprise Hyune as much as it probably should have. She had noticed the increased attention from faculty, the additional observers, and the fact that her exercise performances were being recorded more thoroughly than those of other cadets. "Any advice?" she asked. "Keep being human," Dong-hyun replied, "but be careful about appearing too revolutionary. Some species in the Federation are not comfortable with rapid change." As the weeks continued, Hyune found herself walking a careful line between demonstrating human capabilities and avoiding the appearance of threatening. The tone sounded, "Taejin charged forward immediately." His massive frame moved faster than something his size should have been able to move. The ground shook under his feet as he ran toward Hyune with the force of a landslide. His strategy was simple and effective. Use overwhelming power to end the fight, before his opponent could think of any clever tricks. Hyune did not run away. Instead, she moved at an angle using the rocky terrain to guide his charge while staying just out of reach. Her smaller size let her slip through narrow passages between the artificial rocks that Taejin had to go around, but she knew this would not be enough. Granite bears were patient hunters when they needed to be. As Taijin rounded a large rock formation, he expected to find Hyune trapped in a dead end. Instead, he found empty space. Above him, she had climbed the rock wall using small handholds that her human fingers could grip, but his massive hands could not. She dropped from above as he searched for her energy blade activating as she fell. The blade struck his back but did not cut through his rock-like skin. Taijin spun around with surprising speed for something so large. His arm swept toward where she had landed, moving fast enough to break bones if it connected. Hyune rolled forward, going under his swing instead of away from it. This put her inside his reach, where his size became a disadvantage instead of an advantage. Before he could adjust, her blade found the back of his knee, striking at the joint where even his natural armor had to bend. The blade did not cut deep enough to cause real damage, but it was precise enough to hit nerves and tendons. Taijin stumbled off balance for the first time in the fight. Hyune was already moving, her blade finding another joint, then another. Each strike was calculated to reduce his mobility without causing permanent harm. Impossible, Director Kale-9 muttered from the observation area. She is analyzing his anatomy while fighting. The other faculty members watched in silence as the match continued. Taijin's massive strength meant nothing if he could not catch his opponent. His powerful swings became slower and less accurate as Hyune's precise strikes affected his movement. She stayed close, where his reach worked against him, striking at joints and pressure points that no one had taught her but that she seemed to understand instinctively. The fight lasted 8 minutes. When Taijin finally fell to one knee, unable to support his own weight, the arena was completely quiet. Hyune deactivated her blade and stepped back, breathing hard but still standing. "How?" Taijin asked as medical teams arrived to check his condition. "Every living thing has weak points," Hyune replied, offering him a hand up despite their size difference. "Finding them is just about paying attention." The gesture confused several alien species watching, who did not understand why a winner would help a defeated opponent. For humans, it was simple courtesy. For others, it was a sign of either weakness or something else they could not identify. In the observation area, betting pools shifted dramatically. The human had not just survived longer than expected. She had won using methods that no one had seen before. Director Kale-9 made a note in her file. This one needed to be watched carefully. The matches continued throughout the day. Hyune observed each one, studying fighting styles, biological advantages, and tactical approaches. She noticed that most cadets relied heavily on their species' natural abilities. The strong used strength, the fast used speed, the venomous used poison. Very few tried to adapt their tactics to their opponent. When her second match was announced, she faced Subin, a Felinian like her roommate Nari. Subin moved like liquid lightning, her claws extending to twice their normal length during combat. Her reflexes were nearly 3 times faster than human normal, and she had already defeated 2 opponents with overwhelming speed. "I watched your match with the Rockskin," Subin purred as they faced each other. "Clever tactics, but I am not slow like him. Try to keep up, human." The arena shifted to create an urban environment with tall buildings and multiple levels. Subin immediately used her climbing ability to reach higher ground, looking for the tactical advantage that height and speed would give her. Hyune studied the environment and made a choice that surprised everyone watching. Instead of trying to follow Subin upward, she positioned herself in an open area and waited. Her energy blade remained inactive. She simply stood in the center of the space, apparently defenseless. "Come down and fight," Subin called from above. "Or are humans cowards as well as weak?" Hyune did not respond. She stood perfectly still, watching and waiting. Minutes passed. Subin tried verbal challenges, threats, and insults, but the human did not react. Finally, the Felinian's patience ran out. She dropped from above, claws extended, aiming for what should have been an easy victory against a motionless target. At the last possible moment, Hyune moved. Not away from the attack, but into it, rolling forward and sideways. Subin's claws missed by centimeters, and her landing put her off balance. Hyune's blade activated as she completed her roll, striking Subin's wrist with surgical precision. The Felinian hissed in pain and surprise. Her dominant hand was temporarily paralyzed, claws retracting against her will. Hyune pressed her advantage, staying close where Subin's speed was less useful. "You used me as bait," Subin realized as they grappled. "Patience is also a weapon," Hyune replied, applying a joint lock that forced Subin to surrender. By the end of the first day, 24 cadets remained out of the original 48. Hyune was among the survivors, having won 3 matches through tactics rather than superior physical ability. The betting pools now gave her a 30% chance of surviving the academy, which was a significant improvement from the morning odds. That night in the dormitory, Nari groomed herself with nervous energy. Her golden fur stood up in places and her tail would not stay still. "You fight strangely, human," she said between grooming strokes. "Not like a predator hunting prey, more like something else entirely. Humans are persistence hunters," Hyune explained as she cleaned her equipment. "We do not chase down our food by being faster than it. We do not overpower it by being stronger. We follow it until it gets tired, then we follow it some more. We adapt to whatever it does and we never give up." Nari's ears flattened against her head. On her homeworld, that would describe something truly terrifying. "That sounds horrible," she said quietly. Hyune smiled for the first time since arriving at the academy. "It can be." The second day brought new challenges. Individual combat was replaced by team exercises, environmental hazards, and problem-solving scenarios. Hyune found herself grouped with cadets from 4 different species, each with their own ideas about how combat should work. Their first mission involved retrieving data from a facility guarded by automated defense systems. The team's first instinct was to attack the defenses directly, using their various abilities to smash through obstacles and overwhelm the enemy with superior force. Hyune watched the automated systems for several minutes before suggesting a different approach. "The defenses are programmed to respond to conventional attacks," she said during their planning session. "What if we do not attack them at all?" Her teammates looked skeptical. Minjun, a crystalline ethereal who could walk through solid walls, shimmered with doubt. "How do we complete the mission without fighting the defenses?" "We study them first, find their patterns, learn their blind spots, then we go around them instead of through them." The approach seemed too simple to work, but the team agreed to try it. Instead of fighting the automated systems, they observed carefully. They identified timing patterns, coverage gaps, and design limitations. Then they infiltrated the facility without triggering a single combat protocol. The mission was completed in record time with 0 casualties. Other teams were still fighting their way through the first level of defenses when Hyune's group returned with the data. "Your species thinks differently than ours," Minjun observed afterward. "Not better or worse, just different. It is unsettling." As the days passed, Hyune's reputation spread throughout the academy. She was not the strongest cadet or the fastest or the most naturally gifted, but she had something that others were beginning to recognize as valuable. She could find solutions that others missed. She could adapt to changing situations quickly. Most importantly, she kept functioning when others were overwhelmed by stress or confusion. And always she walked out breathing. Other cadets began asking her advice. Faculty members started observing her methods more closely. Even cadets from species that traditionally looked down on physically weaker beings started treating her with something that might have been respect. But with recognition came new challenges. Not everyone was happy about a human changing the way things worked at the academy. Established order. She continued to excel in her training but began moderating her innovations with more conventional approaches. Still, every violent encounter ended the same way. She walked out breathing, and that consistency was beginning to attract attention from sources far beyond the Academy's faculty. Unknown to the cadets, Federation Military Command had begun developing new training protocols based on observations of human tactical thinking. Hyune's methods were being studied, analyzed, and prepared for implementation across multiple species military academies. But change, even positive change, always created resistance, and some of that resistance was about to become very personal. The confrontation came during the second month, during what should have been a routine meal period. Hyune was eating with her usual mixed group of teammates when Woo Jin approached their table. He was a granite bear from the upper ranks of their class, and his massive frame drew attention from every cadet in the dining facility. Conversations grew quiet as species-specific tension filled the air. Many alien species released chemical signals when stressed or angry, and the mixture was becoming uncomfortable for everyone present. "Human," Woo Jin rumbled, his rock-like features arranged in what passed for a scowl among his people. "Your strange methods are disrupting proper order. Some of us think it is time you learned your place in the hierarchy." Hyune finished her meal with deliberate calm while assessing the situation. Woo Jin had brought supporters, 2 Vorthak and another granite bear, and their positioning suggested this confrontation was planned rather than spontaneous. More concerning was the fact that several other cadets were watching with obvious approval. "What place would that be?" she asked without looking up from her food tray. "Weak species belong at the bottom," one of the Vorthak hissed, scales shimmering with aggressive coloration. "Your tricks may fool the instructors, but they do not change nature." Nari, seated across from Hyune, tensed for action. Her feline instincts were responding to the threat display, and her claws extended slightly as she prepared to defend her roommate. Several other cadets who had served on teams with Hyune also showed signs of readiness for violence. The dining facility was approaching a dangerous flashpoint that could escalate into serious combat. Hyune stood slowly, her movement drawing immediate attention from every being present. At 5.5 feet tall, she was dwarfed by most of her confronters, but her posture radiated calm confidence rather than submission or fear. "You are right," she said clearly enough for the entire facility to hear. "Tricks do not change nature, but they do reveal it." Before anyone could respond to this unexpected agreement, she continued, "Your proper order is based on which species can cause the most physical damage in direct confrontation. But that is not what makes an effective military leader. If it were, the Federation would have conquered the entire galaxy centuries ago instead of still fighting border conflicts with technologically inferior enemies." Wu Jin's expression darkened. "You dare question Federation military superiority? I question why superior beings need to resort to intimidation to maintain their position," Hyune replied calmly. "If your methods are truly better, they should speak for themselves in actual performance." The challenge was subtle but unmistakable to everyone present. Several senior cadets who had been observing from distant tables began moving closer, sensing that something significant was developing. Dong-hyun appeared at Hyune's shoulder with the fluid grace that suggested extensive zero-gravity combat training. His presence added a new dynamic to the confrontation. He was senior rank and had demonstrated 3 years of academy survival against all challenges. "Problem here?" he asked in Federation standard, though his casual tone did not disguise the warning in his voice. "No problem," Wu Jin replied, but his confidence had diminished slightly with the arrival of another human. "Just discussing natural order with the new cadet." "Natural order," Dong-hyun repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting concept. I remember when a granite bear tried to explain that concept to me during my first year, right before I demonstrated that nature also includes psychological warfare and tactical innovation." The tension in the room shifted as cadets recalled Dong-hyun's reputation. He had not only survived 3 years at the academy, but had earned grudging respect from species that traditionally dominated through physical superiority alone. Hyune seized the moment to make her own proposal. "I suggest we settle this question properly. If you believe conventional hierarchy should determine leadership effectiveness, let us test that assumption under controlled conditions." She gestured toward the facility's central area, which could be quickly reconfigured for various activities. "Combat exercise. Your team against mine. Standard academy rules and supervision. If you win, I will defer to traditional ranking in all future exercises and team assignments. And if you win?" Wu Jin asked suspiciously. "Then we discuss leadership based on actual results rather than theoretical assumptions about species superiority." The challenge could not be refused without significant loss of face, particularly with so many witnesses present from multiple species. Director KL9, who had been monitoring the situation through security feeds, arrived just as the terms were being finalized. "Unauthorized combat is strictly prohibited," he announced, his mandibles clicking with authority. "Then authorize it officially," Hyune replied respectfully but firmly. "Call it an advanced leadership evaluation exercise. Test both approaches under controlled conditions with proper medical supervision." Director KL9 considered this while studying the assembled cadets. The tension was approaching levels that could result in unauthorized violence anyway. Better to channel that energy into something educational and controlled. "Very well. Combat exercise in Arena 7 in 20 minutes. Standard non-lethal rules, full medical teams on standby." His compound eyes focused specifically on Hyune. "If this goes wrong, the consequences will be severe for everyone involved." 20 minutes later, both teams stood ready in the arena's staging areas. Wu Jin had assembled a formidable group based entirely on individual combat capability, all physically dominant species with proven fighting records and traditional tactical training. Their strategy would be straightforward. overwhelm the opposition through superior force and conventional coordination. Hyune's team was more diverse and on paper significantly less impressive. Nari provided speed and agility, while Jae-sung brought granite bear strength combined with tactical flexibility. The others represented various species who had volunteered based on positive experiences working under human leadership rather than raw combat ability. The arena was configured as an urban environment with multiple levels, varied terrain and complex sightlines. The objective was simple: secure 3 control points while preventing the opposition from doing the same. Standard military scenario with no unusual parameters or hidden complications. As the exercise began, Woo Jin's team executed exactly the strategy everyone expected. They moved as a coordinated unit toward the central control point, intending to secure it through overwhelming force and then hold it against any counterattack attempts. Hyune's approach was characteristically unconventional. Instead of competing directly for the central objective, her team split into smaller units and moved toward the outer control points. When Woo Jin's team reached the center, they found it completely undefended and secured it easily. "Is she surrendering the most valuable position?" Director KL9 muttered from the observation deck, confused by this apparent tactical error. The answer became clear as the exercise progressed. While Woo Jin's team held the central control point, Hyune's smaller unit secured both outer positions and began a coordinated harassment campaign. The central position became a liability rather than an asset, as its defenders found themselves surrounded and under constant pressure from multiple directions. More importantly, Hyune's team demonstrated something that traditional academy training had never emphasized. They were clearly enjoying themselves. Their communication was relaxed but efficient. Their movements flowed naturally between team members, and they adapted to changing conditions without rigid adherence to predetermined plans. Woo Jin's team, by contrast, showed increasing frustration as their superior individual capabilities failed to provide the expected advantages. Their communication became terse and formal, their movements less coordinated and their responses increasingly predictable. The exercise ended when Hyune's team controlled 2 of 3 objectives, while successfully containing the opposition in the central location. Technical victory, but more importantly, a clear demonstration that alternative approaches could be not just effective, but demonstrably superior. As both teams regrouped in the arena center for debriefing, Woo Jin approached Hyune with something that might have been grudging respect replacing his earlier hostility. "Your methods are effective," he admitted reluctantly, "but they feel wrong somehow, unnatural." "Different does not mean wrong," Hyune replied. "It just means different. The galaxy contains threats we have not encountered yet. Should our military not be prepared for anything rather than just familiar challenges?" The conversation that followed involved most of the Academy's established order. She continued to excel in her training but began moderating her innovations with more conventional approaches. Still, every violent encounter ended the same way. She walked out breathing, and that consistency was beginning to attract attention from sources far beyond the Academy's faculty. Unknown to the cadets, Federation Military Command had begun developing new training protocols based on observations of human tactical thinking. Hyune's methods were being studied, analyzed, and prepared for implementation across multiple species military academies. But change, even positive change, always created resistance, and some of that resistance was about to become very personal. The confrontation came during the 2nd month, during what should have been a routine meal period. Hyune was eating with her usual mixed group of teammates when Woo Jin approached their table. He was a granite bear from the upper ranks of their class, and his massive frame drew attention from every cadet in the dining facility. Conversations grew quiet as species-specific tension filled the air. Many alien species released chemical signals when stressed or angry, and the mixture was becoming uncomfortable for everyone present. "Human," Woo Jin rumbled, his rock-like features arranged in what passed for a scowl among his people. "Your strange methods are disrupting proper order. Some of us think it is time you learned your place in the hierarchy." Hyune finished her meal with deliberate calm while assessing the situation. Woo Jin had brought supporters, 2 Vorthak and another granite bear, and their positioning suggested this confrontation was planned rather than spontaneous. More concerning was the fact that several other cadets were watching with obvious approval. "What place would that be?" she asked without looking up from her food tray. "Weak species belong at the bottom," one of the Vorthak hissed, scales shimmering with aggressive coloration. Your tricks may fool the instructors, but they do not change nature. Nari, seated across from Hyune, tensed for action. Her feline instincts were responding to the threat display, and her claws extended slightly as she prepared to defend her roommate. Several other cadets who had served on teams with Hyune also showed signs of readiness for violence. The dining facility was approaching a dangerous flashpoint that could escalate into serious combat. Hyune stood slowly, her movement drawing immediate attention from every being present. At 5.5 feet tall, she was dwarfed by most of her confronters, but her posture radiated calm confidence rather than submission or fear. "You are right," she said clearly enough for the entire facility to hear. "Tricks do not change nature, but they do reveal it." Before anyone could respond to this unexpected agreement, she continued, "Your proper order is based on which species can cause the most physical damage in direct confrontation. But that is not what makes an effective military leader. If it were, the Federation would have conquered the entire galaxy centuries ago instead of still fighting border conflicts with technologically inferior enemies." Wu Jin's expression darkened. "You dare question Federation military superiority? I question why superior beings need to resort to intimidation to maintain their position." Hyune replied calmly. "If your methods are truly better, they should speak for themselves in actual performance." The challenge was subtle but unmistakable to everyone present. Several senior cadets who had been observing from distant tables began moving closer, sensing that something significant was developing. Dong-hyun appeared at Hyune's shoulder with the fluid grace that suggested extensive zero-gravity combat training. His presence added a new dynamic to the confrontation. He was senior rank and had demonstrated 3 years of academy survival against all challenges. "Problem here?" he asked in Federation standard, though his casual tone did not disguise the warning in his voice. "No problem," Wu Jin replied, but his confidence had diminished slightly with the arrival of another human. "Just discussing natural order with the new cadet." "Natural order," Dong-hyun repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting concept. I remember when a granite bear tried to explain that concept to me during my first year, right before I demonstrated that nature also includes psychological warfare and tactical innovation." The tension in the room shifted as cadets recalled Dong-hyun's reputation. He had not only survived 3 years at the academy, but had earned grudging respect from species that traditionally dominated through physical superiority alone. Hyune seized the moment to make her own proposal. "I suggest we settle this question properly. If you believe conventional hierarchy should determine leadership effectiveness, let us test that assumption under controlled conditions." She gestured toward the facility's central area, which could be quickly reconfigured for various activities. "Combat exercise. Your team against mine. Standard academy rules and supervision. If you win, I will defer to traditional ranking in all future exercises and team assignments. And if you win?" Wu Jin asked suspiciously. "Then we discuss leadership based on actual results rather than theoretical assumptions about species superiority." The challenge could not be refused without significant loss of face, particularly with so many witnesses present from multiple species. Director KL9, who had been monitoring the situation through security feeds, arrived just as the terms were being finalized. "Unauthorized combat is strictly prohibited," he announced, his mandibles clicking with authority. "Then authorize it officially," Hyune replied respectfully but firmly. "Call it an advanced leadership evaluation exercise. Test both approaches under controlled conditions with proper medical supervision." Director Kyle 9 considered this while studying the assembled cadets. The tension was approaching levels that could result in unauthorized violence anyway. Better to channel that energy into something educational and controlled. "Very well. Combat exercise in Arena 7 in 20 minutes. Standard non-lethal rules, full medical teams on standby." His compound eyes focused specifically on Hyune. "If this goes wrong, the consequences will be severe for everyone involved." 20 minutes later, both teams stood ready in the arena's staging areas. Wu Jin had assembled a formidable group based entirely on individual combat capability, all physically dominant species with proven fighting records and traditional tactical training. Their strategy would be straightforward: overwhelm the opposition through superior force and conventional coordination. Hyune's team was more diverse and on paper significantly less impressive. Nari provided speed and agility, while Jae-sung brought granite bear strength combined with tactical flexibility. The others represented various species who had volunteered based on positive experiences working under human leadership rather than raw combat ability. The arena was configured as an urban environment with multiple levels, varied terrain and complex sightlines. The objective was simple: secure 3 control points while preventing the opposition from doing the same. Standard military scenario with no unusual parameters or hidden complications. As the exercise began, Wu Jin's team executed exactly the strategy everyone expected. They moved as a coordinated unit toward the central control point, intending to secure it through overwhelming force and then hold it against any counterattack attempts. Hyune's approach was characteristically unconventional. Instead of competing directly for the central objective, her team split into smaller units and moved toward the outer control points. When Wu Jin's team reached the center, they found it completely undefended and secured it easily. "Is she surrendering the most valuable position?" Director KL9 muttered from the observation deck, confused by this apparent tactical error. The answer became clear as the exercise progressed. While Wu Jin's team held the central control point, Hyune's smaller unit secured both outer positions and began a coordinated harassment campaign. The central position became a liability rather than an asset, as its defenders found themselves surrounded and under constant pressure from multiple directions. More importantly, Hyune's team demonstrated something that traditional academy training had never emphasized. They were clearly enjoying themselves. Their communication was relaxed but efficient. Their movements flowed naturally between team members, and they adapted to changing conditions without rigid adherence to predetermined plans. Wu Jin's team, by contrast, showed increasing frustration as their superior individual capabilities failed to provide the expected advantages. Their communication became terse and formal, their movements less coordinated and their responses increasingly predictable. The exercise ended when Hyune's team controlled 2 of 3 objectives, while successfully containing the opposition in the central location. Technical victory, but more importantly, a clear demonstration that alternative approaches could be not just effective, but demonstrably superior. As both teams regrouped in the arena center for debriefing, Wu Jin approached Hyune with something that might have been grudging respect replacing his earlier hostility. "Your methods are effective," he admitted reluctantly, "but they feel wrong somehow, unnatural." "Different does not mean wrong," Hyune replied. "It just means different. The galaxy contains threats we have not encountered yet. Should our military not be prepared for anything rather than just familiar challenges?" The conversation that followed involved most of the academies. The message arrived during Hyune's 3rd month at the academy, delivered through official channels with security encryption, normally reserved for high-level military communications. Director KL9 called her to his office with unusual formality, his mandibles clicking in patterns that indicated significant stress or excitement. "Cadet Hyun-A," he began without his usual small talk, "you are to report to Conference Room Alpha immediately for a classified briefing. You will discuss nothing you learn there with fellow cadets or faculty members." The conference room contained beings she had never seen before, high-ranking Federation officials whose species she could not immediately identify, along with what appeared to be representatives from Earth's diplomatic corps. The technological sophistication of their equipment and the subtle defensive measures she noticed suggested this meeting was far beyond routine academy business. Admiral Vorkes, a crystalline ethereal whose faceted features reflected light in complex patterns, addressed her directly. His species was known for their ability to phase through solid matter and their extremely long lifespans. "Cadet Hyune, your performance at this academy has attracted attention from the highest levels of Federation command. We have questions that require immediate answers." "Yes, sir." "Your tactical innovations have been studied extensively by our strategic analysts," continued a Vorthak official, whose scale coloration indicated extreme age and experience. "Some of your methods violate fundamental assumptions about military science that have guided Federation doctrine for over 3 centuries. Hyune remained silent, unsure whether this was criticism or something else entirely. Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming from Earth's diplomatic mission leaned forward slightly. He was the first familiar face in the room, though his expression was carefully neutral. "What they are trying to explain, Cadet, is that your approaches work better than they should. Better than our theoretical models predict, better than established military science suggests is possible. Admiral Voorkes activated a holographic display showing tactical analyses from multiple Federation conflicts spanning decades of warfare. We have tested your documented methods against historical scenarios. In 68% of cases, human-style approaches would have achieved significantly better outcomes than our actual strategies. More concerning, added the Vorthak official, scales shifting through rapid color changes, is that these improvements appear to scale exponentially when applied to larger force structures. A small human tactical unit shows marginal advantages. A human-trained division shows significant advantages. A human-directed fleet might be... He paused, scales settling into patterns that indicated deep uncertainty. Unprecedented ineffectiveness. Hyune processed this information while studying the assembled officials. Their body language suggested a mixture of excitement and apprehension that she found deeply troubling. Sir, if I may ask, what exactly are you asking me to do? Admiral Voorkes exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding. The patterns of light reflecting through his crystalline features suggested intense internal discussion. The Federation faces strategic challenges that conventional military doctrine has proven inadequate to address. Border conflicts that have persisted for decades, technological stagnation in defensive systems, and the constant threat of unknown hostile forces beyond explored space. Ambassador Chen leaned back in his chair, his diplomatic training evident in his carefully controlled posture. Earth's membership in the Federation was accelerated partially because of resource requirements, but also because of growing recognition that humanity might offer strategic advantages that other species currently lack. You are being offered an opportunity, the Vorthak continued, to participate in an advanced program that would bypass the remainder of standard academy training. Direct commissioning as a Federation tactical consultant, with access to classified strategic information and real operational scenarios involving active combat zones. The offer hung in the air while Hyune considered its implications. Advancement beyond the academy would mean opportunities she had never imagined, but it would also mean leaving behind the relatively simple goal of proving human competence in favor of something far more complex and potentially dangerous. What would happen to the other cadets if I accepted? She asked. My classmates, the current training programs? The academy would continue operating normally, Admiral Voorkes replied. Your innovations are already being studied and incorporated into standard curriculum across multiple training facilities. Your direct participation would no longer be necessary for that process. Ambassador Chen's expression suggested there were aspects of this offer that were not being explicitly stated. Hyune caught his subtle warning signal and filed it away for later consideration. I need time to consider this offer carefully, she said finally. Of course. You have 48 hours to make your decision. Admiral Voorkes deactivated the holographic displays and stood to leave. Understand, cadet, that this opportunity will not be offered again. The Federation's strategic position requires immediate action on multiple fronts. After the officials departed, Ambassador Chen remained behind with Hyun-ai. When they were completely alone, his diplomatic composure shifted to something more personal and urgent. They did not tell you everything, he said quietly, activating a small privacy device that would prevent their conversation from being monitored. Earth's position in the Federation is more precarious than most humans realize. We are useful, but we are also unpredictable from their perspective. Some species view us as a potential threat to established galactic order. And this offer could be a genuine opportunity to demonstrate human value to the Federation. Or it could be an attempt to separate humanity's most effective representative from her natural support structure and cultural context. Chen studied her carefully. Your innovations work because they are genuinely human approaches to problem solving. Remove you from human context and they might stop working effectively, or they might work too well for some people's comfort. Hyune returned to her dormitory with her mind churning through implications and possibilities. Nari immediately noticed her distraction but respected the obvious need for privacy. Other cadets seemed to sense that something significant had occurred, giving her space while maintaining their usual social patterns. That evening, she contacted Dong-hyun through secure channels. As the only other human at the academy, he might have insights that could help her make this decision. They met in one of the academy's observation lounges, a space designed for reflection that offered spectacular views of the star field beyond Nexus Prime Station. Dong-hyun listened to her explanation without interruption, his expression growing increasingly serious. They offered me something very similar during my second year, he revealed once she had finished explaining the situation. Advanced tactical training, immediate commissioning, assignment to Federation Strategic Command with access to classified operations. What did you choose? I turned it down. Dong-hyun gazed out at the stars while organizing his thoughts carefully. Not because the opportunity was not genuine, but because I realized they were not really offering me advancement. They were offering to make me into something else entirely. He turned to face her directly, his expression intense. The Federation has been stable for centuries because it operates on predictable principles. Physical superiority determines military hierarchy. Technological advancement follows established patterns, and different species maintain clearly defined roles. Humans disrupt all of that simply by being human. Is that necessarily bad? No, but it is dangerous. For them and for us. Dong-hyun activated his own privacy device. I chose to complete standard training because I wanted to prove that humans could succeed within existing systems. You have chosen to prove that existing systems might need fundamental changes. Hyune considered this while watching a Federation patrol ship navigate between the station's defensive platforms with practiced efficiency. What do you think I should do? I think you should ask yourself what you really want to accomplish. If your goal is personal advancement and recognition, take their offer. If your goal is proving human worth to the Federation leadership, take their offer. But if your goal is helping humanity find its proper place in the galaxy, he paused significantly. Maybe that place is not where they want to put us. The conversation continued for another hour, covering topics that ranged from Federation politics to human evolutionary advantages, to the fundamental question of whether military excellence should be measured by conventional standards or adaptive capability. When they parted, Hyune had no clearer answer but a much better understanding of the complex questions involved in her decision. She spent the next day observing her fellow cadets with completely new perspective. The changes that had occurred since her arrival were subtle, but undeniably significant. Traditional hierarchies were less rigid, tactical discussions were more creative and inclusive, and cooperation between different species had improved markedly throughout the academy. More importantly, several cadets had begun developing their own innovative approaches rather than simply copying human methods. Nari had integrated. Hyune stood before Admiral Vorkes and his assembled officials, with the calm determination that had carried her through 3 months of academy challenges. Her decision had crystallized during the night, shaped by conversations with Dong-hyun, observations of her fellow cadets, and most importantly, by her understanding of what it truly meant to be human in a galaxy that operated by different rules. Admiral, I respectfully decline your offer. The silence that followed carried weight beyond simple surprise. Several officials exchanged glances that suggested this possibility had been considered but not expected. Admiral Vorkes's crystalline features shifted through patterns that indicated deep thought and calculation. May I ask your reasoning, Cadet? You offered me the opportunity to advance beyond standard training, to help address Federation strategic challenges, Hyune replied carefully. But I believe the most valuable contribution I can make is to complete my training here, with my classmates, using the systems the Federation has already established. Ambassador Chen's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but she caught a subtle indication of approval in his carefully controlled posture. You are choosing to remain in a training environment rather than advance to immediate operational effectiveness, the Vorthak official observed, scales shifting to colors that indicated confusion and disappointment. This serves neither your personal advancement nor Federation strategic interests. With respect, sir, I disagree completely. Hyune activated the room's holographic display using standard equipment. My innovations work because they are based on human cognitive patterns applied to military problems. Remove me from the training environment, and you lose the opportunity to understand how those patterns develop and can be successfully integrated with other species approaches. The display showed Academy performance, metrics from the past 3 months, not just her own results, but those of cadets who had trained alongside her and learned from her methods. Tactical effectiveness across all species has improved by an average of 15%. Interspecies cooperation has increased by 23%. Most significantly, Innovative problem-solving among non-human cadets has improved by 31%. Admiral Vorkes studied the data with obvious interest. Light patterns shifted across his crystalline surface as he processed the implications. You are suggesting that human value lies not in replacement of existing systems but in enhancement of them. I am suggesting that the best human contribution to Federation military effectiveness is teaching others to think like humans when appropriate, while learning to think like them when that approach is more effective. The Vorthek official's scale settled into patterns that indicated grudging respect and understanding. An interesting perspective. But this approach requires years rather than months to fully implement and evaluate. Yes, sir, but it also creates sustainable improvement rather than dependency on a single individual or isolated human methods. Ambassador Chen leaned forward slightly, his diplomatic training evident in his careful choice of words. Cadet, are you certain this decision reflects your personal preferences rather than external pressure or concerns about Earth's position in the Federation? The question carried implications about humanity's place in galactic civilization, and the possibility that her choice was being influenced by factors beyond her own judgment. Hyunei understood that her answer would be analyzed not just for its content, but for its authenticity and underlying motivations. Ambassador, I came to this academy to prove that humans belong in the Federation. I have learned that belonging is not about proving we are better than other species, or that we can replace their methods with our own. It is about proving we can make everyone better while becoming better ourselves. She gestured toward the door beyond which her fellow cadets were continuing their training and development. Out there are beings from dozens of species who are learning to think beyond their traditional limitations and assumptions. They are not becoming human in the process. They are becoming better versions of themselves. That seems more valuable than anything I could accomplish. Working alone in isolation. Admiral Vorkes deactivated the holographic displays and stood with fluid grace that suggested extensive zero-gravity adaptation over many decades of space service. Your decision is noted and officially accepted. Cadet, you will continue standard academy training through graduation. However, he continued, your performance will continue to be monitored at the highest levels of Federation command. Should circumstances change significantly, this offer may be reconsidered. After the officials departed for other business, Ambassador Chen remained for a private conversation. His diplomatic composure relaxed slightly as they found themselves alone in the conference room. That was very well handled, he said with obvious approval. You managed to decline their offer without closing future options or suggesting that Federation strategic planning is fundamentally flawed. Is it fundamentally flawed? Chen smiled grimly while considering his response carefully. Let us say it is traditionally effective against traditional threats. Your presence here suggests humanity might help them prepare for non-traditional challenges that conventional methods cannot address. The conversation was interrupted by Director KL9, who entered with his characteristic clicking mandibles and obvious agitation about recent developments. Cadet Hyunei, report to Arena 5 immediately. There has been a serious incident involving interspecies conflict. The incident, as Hyunei discovered, involved two senior cadets whose species had a long history of territorial conflicts and resource competition. The disagreement had escalated beyond verbal confrontation, and traditional academy protocols had failed to prevent actual violence. One cadet was in medical care with serious injuries, while the other faced potential expulsion and criminal charges. More concerning was the fact that the incident had occurred during a training exercise designed specifically to test interspecies cooperation. This was precisely the kind of challenge that Hyunei's innovations had been successfully addressing throughout her time at the academy. The question, Director KL9 explained as they observed medical teams treating the injured cadet, is whether this represents a failure of new training methods or a demonstration of why traditional approaches exist and remain necessary. Several faculty members and senior cadets had gathered to observe the aftermath and discuss its implications. Their body language suggested that opinions were sharply divided about the meaning of the incident and its impact on ongoing training reforms. Hyunei studied the scene while considering what she knew about both species involved in the conflict. The Corvin who had been injured were naturally territorial but also highly intelligent. The Nexarian who had caused the injuries was from a species that used controlled aggression as a social bonding mechanism. Director, may I review the exercise parameters and communication logs from this incident? Why would that be relevant? Because I suspect this was not a failure of new methods, but a failure to properly implement them, according to their underlying principles. The data confirmed her suspicion completely. The exercise had been designed using traditional Federation protocols with only superficial modifications to accommodate her tactical innovations. The fundamental assumption remained that different species should maintain separate roles based on their natural characteristics and traditional strengths. The problem, she explained to the assembled observers, is that we are trying to integrate new approaches with old assumptions about species hierarchy and role assignments. You cannot teach creative cooperation while maintaining rigid, species-based hierarchies and traditional power structures. She activated a holographic display showing communication patterns during the failed exercise. Look at this data carefully. The Corvan cadet attempted to suggest a tactical modification based on terrain analysis and environmental factors. The Nexarian cadet rejected it immediately because territorial assessment is not traditionally a Nexarian responsibility according to established protocols. When the Corvan persisted with the suggestion, the Nexarian interpreted it as a direct challenge to established hierarchy, rather than a legitimate tactical contribution. From that point, species-specific conflict responses took over completely. Director Kale 9's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this analysis and its implications for Academy training policies. You are suggesting the incident occurred because we have not fully implemented new protocols, rather than because new protocols do not work effectively. I am suggesting that partial integration is more dangerous than no integration at all, Hyunai replied firmly. If you are going to change how different species work together, you have to change everything systematically, not just surface tactics while maintaining underlying assumptions. The implications of this observation extended far beyond a single training accident. The Academy's integration of human tactical methods had been selective, focusing on techniques that provided obvious advantages while maintaining traditional command structures and species-based role assignments that had governed military hierarchy for centuries. Over the following days, Hyunei found herself working directly with faculty members to